Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, and today I'm hanging out with Jennifer. I'm just going to butcher your last name. You want to say it for me?
Kretschmer. Hi, guys.
Kretschmer. Okay, I might not have butchered that one. You go by Jennifer or Jen?
Jen usually, but either one's fine.
Okay, Jen. So thanks for coming on today, and good morning.
For having me. Good morning.
And we are just talking a little bit earlier, and you're talking about your throat because of all the fires in LA,
Yeah.
and I know I know seeing all the pictures on social media, it literally looked like the Hell's Mouth.
Yeah, it was like Mordor out here. It was pretty intense. It's pretty scary. A lot of people I know got evacuated, and it's we're really really lucky to have the emergency services we have right now, and have a bunch of folks from other states coming in to help out too. But it's we had 4 major fires simultaneously burning, and one of them is one of the largest fires we've ever had in California. So it's pretty scary. But I actually had I am several miles from the fires, but I was close enough that I was close to the edge of the voluntary evacuation zone for one of them. But I had my windows shut, and I had ash come in and coat my windowsills. Over the course of 2 days, it was thick enough you could draw in it. It was pretty intense. So
Yeah,
if I sound a little hoarse or I'm coughing, I apologize. It's just
no apologies necessary. Glad you're safe and everyone else was safe as well. I know on the news seeing like the side by sides of when the fires were raging, and the next day was crazy. It's like fires, hell, oh, nothing happened, nothing going on.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. It was really sudden. It all happened over the course of like 2 days. They all kicked off. We had really, really intense winds, which is what sets it off. We get something called the Santa Ana winds, and they come starting in the fall, and it tends to be a warm spell in the middle of fall and winter, and we get really, really gusty winds. And so that was kicking off everything, and knocked out a bunch of power lines, but most of these were wildfires, so they were set by the actual by brush or wildfire, or brush or various plants catching. But it's really sad. A lot of people lost a lot, and to have it happen this time of year, just it's pretty terrible. So, but there are amazing people helping out. Jose Andres organized a bunch of food drives, and he's doing incredible work also in Puerto Rico. It's the whole Mr. Rogers look for the helpers thing, and a lot of really spectacular people have been helping. So
It's so crazy. People rag on New Jersey, but I'm like, we don't get tornadoes or hurricanes. Like, we felt some aftershocks from an earthquake in Delaware, which was a crazy thing anyway.
Yeah.
But pretty much, we have to deal with the 4 seasons. But other than that, it's pretty mellow. It's a pop waste, What are you gonna do?
Yeah. What was it? The 4 seasons of LA are earthquakes, floods, wildfires, and there's one more. Riots, I think, is the last one that we'll always throw in there.
It's just it is just a post-apocalyptic setting in the making. That's what it is.
It is, yeah. Like all we need is just 2 of those to coincide, and we're tanked. But it's a wonderful reminder to like prep your emergency bag, guys.
Yeah, we're boned in New Jersey because we're like, emergency for what? Nothing happens. I want to thank you, Mr. Trask, for the super chat. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So before we started, we were talking a little bit, and we kind of like buzzed by each other when we were in LA. It was like it was a really emotional day for you. For us, like that whole like 4 or 5 days we're there went by in a blur. Yeah. And we were kind of like hanging out at the beginning of the Maze Arcana session that night or that day, and we were getting ready to run out to meet up with the fans. So we didn't really get a chance to talk. And do you want to explain a little bit why it was an emotional day for you?
Yeah, we met in passing the day that Saerosi was heading out to go to sorcerer school. So I was heading off of the show. So it was an intense morning. I knew I was leaving, and the rest of the gang didn't. So I was going in knowing where we were headed that day, and it was a tough one. I missed those guys. But just life happens, and other exciting things were going on, and that's how it goes sometimes. But yeah, but so that was a frantic kind of day where things are all over the place. But I'm so glad we're getting to chat now. It's really awesome. So
That's right. It's just a perfect excuse to bring you on and talk about some D&D. You're heavily involved in the entertainment industry. That's what you do for a living. You're a producer, a bunch of also actress credits as well.
Yeah. I primarily produce TV. I also act. I direct. I write. So I do all of the things. I like to know how to do all of the technical aspects of making TV and film. I started as an actor, but I've been producing and working production side for most of the last decade. And it's fascinating and it's really cool, and I love my job. And I love D&D, and I love that I get to talk about D&D with people and share this thing that's been my passion for, since I was 17 years old. So it's great.
How did you get started with gaming?
In high school, so I went to a summer camp in upstate New York when I was a kid, and we had a group that played D&D, and a lot of my friends played, but I didn't really get into it. I didn't really start playing regularly. My brother was really into it for a while, and he had all of the second edition books, and he sat down and tried to teach me, but I wasn't really in the right headspace yet. And then in high school, that's when I started playing. I had a core group of friends, and they were like, "Hey, let's play some D&D." And I kind of went, "Sure, why not?" And that was it. And once we started, it went from there. I was in that game. We went for 8 years in that campaign, and I've been playing ever since. And it's one of my favorite things to do in the world.
You're the same age as my youngest brother, so. Yeah. You would have been starting right at the tail end of when it definitely was still not cool to play D&D.
Oh, no, I was definitely not cool. I was the kind of nerd, I literally got locked in lockers. I skipped recess to go hang out in the library and read fantasy books. I was not cool by any stretch of the imagination. This was not the thing that that you told people you did on the weekends. And the fact that now, like, I'll be at work and people will be like, "You play D&D? Can you teach me?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, let's sit down, let's play a game." That's so different. And I love that that's changed, and that it's become this really inclusive, welcoming committee, hobby and community. But it was not the cool thing to do when I started, and for a long time, and to then be a woman on top of that was a very different world, playing back when I started.
I can only imagine, because our experience has been it took me until I was like in my late 30s to have regular women players at our tables. So I totally get that from the other side. That just the interest wasn't there. It was closed off. I don't know. Even when I started playing, it wasn't like you didn't go to game stores and play. You just played with a group of friends. That was in our area, and it wasn't really a thing yet. So at best, we would get maybe significant others that would show up to either see what their partner was doing, or to check it out, or just wanted to hang out with them, and this is what they were doing, so they were there. So it took a long time, and I literally started the Sister Scarlethood game because I just wanted a different gaming experience. So I reached out to female players that I knew and said, "Hey, do you guys want to join me for a game of D&D?" And I actually had like one of my older male friends be like, "Well, how do you run for women?" I'm like, "I don't know. I run it the same way I run it for everybody else." And
the same way you run D&D for anyone, yeah.
Yeah. And then I mean, there's definitely differences, but it's a lot of fun. And actually, sometimes my female players are more crude than my male players.
Yeah, I think I remember the first time I am in a group that is pretty much 50-50, but we were one night, a bunch of the guys couldn't show up, and so it was one guy and then all women, and I can't remember if I was DMing or one of the other women was DMing, but the player was like, "I've never played with a group of all women before. I don't know how this is going to go." And within 5 minutes, he's like, "Oh, you guys are still sailors. Like, it's exactly the same." And then to take that to another level, to be a female DM, I didn't know any other female DMs. until I was out of college and had been really involved in the scene for a while. So the fact that now there are so many is really cool, because for many, many years, I didn't know anyone else who was a woman who DM'd. So that's really exciting.
And now you can watch like tons of streamers that are streaming D&D, male and female, and and everything in between. So like it is like we were like in a renaissance and a golden age for gaming.
Absolutely.
Although from talking to different industry people, it seems like the numbers are still like way down from where it was in the 80s for the hobby. And I'm like, it just doesn't seem like it because we're so connected.
But Wizards has had their best year ever last year. Or this year, it's just going up and up. And if you look at the coverage in the media, the attention to it, and things like Stranger Things making it very much public, I'm not sure that that's an accurate assessment at this point, because we don't have like the satanic panic that we had in the 80s. Like that's not working against it. The stereotypes have shifted. So I think that we are moving out of that. And so I would be actually very surprised if there are fewer players now than there were in the 80s.
But either way, we are in a golden age. Like I couldn't believe it. Like I kept gaming a secret for so long. Like at work, I would rather them think I was doing anything but gaming.
Yeah.
And we joke often about the earlier days of when you're trying to like find new players and a new group. It almost felt like you're like a druggie seeking out drugs for the first time in a new area. Can I copy the D20?
The poster, the tack board at your local gaming store, kind of in the corner, and you're just sort of surreptitiously are putting up the looking for group. Like, I mean, every gaming store has that, and I just remember kind of going over and looking and being like, where can I find a new group? But now it's so easy. Now there adventurously wasn't happening a few years ago, and now you can just show up. You go to your gaming store and you show up and you say, I want to play D&D, and they're like, okay, we got a game Thursday night, we have a game Tuesday night, we have a game Saturday night. And it's awesome.
Yeah, Alfate says one of the games he runs is 50% teenage girls, and also like I was talking to Clint Black from Pinnacle, and he was telling me about his daughter's game, and that they had a party going on, a birthday party, and they were talking about their group and gaming, and actually like just how far ahead of us this like crop of gamers is. They're talking about role playing and things like that. Where when I was that age, it was just kicking the door, killing a monster, taking stuff. And like the adventure started at the door of the dungeon.
Yeah, no. And now I think some of that is we're having the example of these very immersive role-playing stories, and where people are because of the access to streaming games, and I'll talk a little bit about why I think streaming is a double-edged sword, because I do have some concerns that I think can be off-putting to new players because of streaming. But I think one of the great benefits we've gotten out of streaming is having the opportunity to watch masterful storytellers and masterful players take on these characters and get people emotionally invested in these stories and realize what a satisfying emotional arc you can have in a game. And show people why we get invested in these characters and why we want to play games that last for years and years and years. And why these are the stories that we tell, and why when we talk about our experience at D&D, we don't talk about, I rolled a blah, blah, blah. We talk about, and then we smashed down the door to the dungeon, and then they stabbed the dragon in the eyeball. Like, that you tell these stories as if you actually did them, because you care and you get so, it matters. So I think having things like Critical Role and the Adventure Zone and, all of these stories where you listen and your heart gets hooked in, they get their hooks in you, and you care about these stories and these characters and what happens to them. That's one of the great gifts that streaming has given us.
So in the chat, there's definitely some interest in, they want to hear what your concerns are with streaming.
Yeah, my concerns are kind of the flip side of that is people, I think, see games like that and don't think, they go, okay, well, I can't run a game like that. So it scares people off of DMing. So people are afraid that because they can't do 800 voices, that they're a failure as a DM. That's just not true. you should not expect to walk in and be able to perform the way that people who are professionals perform. You know, these are a lot of these top streamers are people who make their living as actors and as motion capture or voiceover performers. And so to expect that your home game of folks that don't do that for a living are going to do that is just not what that shouldn't be the expectation you walk in with. I also think that people forget that streamed games are to a certain extent a performance. And I've talked about this on my personal stream, that at some point I want to stream some of my home game where we're in sweatpants and eating pizza, because it's not entertaining to watch to an audience. So a stream game, you have to have an awareness of an audience, and you're performing with an awareness of needing to have a satisfying story for an audience. When you're at a home game, you only need to satisfy the people around the table. So if you're happy doing a trip where all you're doing is bartering with shopkeepers and that's fun for your group, cool, do that at your home game. But on a streamed game, that would never fly, because that's just generally not interesting for an audience to watch. So
now, surprisingly enough, I will say we literally take a lot of our in-person games, throw a camera up in the corner and just let it roll.
Mm-hmm.
And though they routinely get like 500 views, 1,000 views. The very first one we did is up at like 180,000 views or something like that. So there are definitely people that will watch no matter what kind of game you run. Yeah. And I think if you poke around the internet a little bit, you will find more of those games as well. Yeah. But we also do a collab game where it's also a show. So we're conscious of that. We try to pull it back to the game as much as possible, but at the same time, you have to keep things moving so that you can keep audiences engaged. And then if you get sponsors or anything like that involved, then you're super conscious of, are people watching this? Yeah. Are we performing for the people watching so that they want to watch? Are we performing well so that the sponsors will keep sponsoring you? There becomes all these other factors. You're correct.
It's really different. It's for me, it's I think about it like the TV shows I work on versus just hanging out with friends. It's a very different game. And for me, when I'm doing a stream and when I'm just sitting around playing with friends, because there is that awareness, and you're worrying about lighting, and you're like worried about camera setups, and you're worried about having a switcher and making sure that you're having, one shots on people and two shots, and making sure you've got, there's a technical aspect to it that you have to worry about, that when you're at a home game, all you're worrying about is, did everybody bring snacks and soda? So I think that, and a number of my home games are with performers. So like, I don't know if I was on a stream called Seven Souls, where TJ Storm DM'd, and I play in TJ's home game. He's my Sunday night game with a bunch of the guys that were on Seven Souls and then a few other people. So it's almost all actors, and it's an amazing game, and I love the home game so much. It's like my favorite thing in the world. But playing Seven Souls was very, very different than doing our home game. And so there was talk about, hey, maybe we'll take the Sunday game and just stream it. But it's not going to be the same experience at all. So we all kind of have had to discuss whether we want to do that, because it's just, there's Seven Souls, we had 5 episodes. We knew we had to get from A to B in that storyline. We wanted to make sure we had satisfying episodes and a satisfying series arc, and it's just not the same as this open-ended game that TJ's campaign stretched for like 15 years, and that's not the same. You can't. They're not analogous in any way.
That's got to be worse for you too, because that's what you do for a living. So I imagine it'd be hard to not go into producer mode.
Yeah, but I go into producer mode by default in everything I do to a certain extent. But I think for me, the home games are my chance that I don't have to stress about that. Stream games are somewhere in the middle, because I'm getting to do a thing I love. I love producing in general, but when I'm doing a stream game, I'm getting to do the thing I love, which is D&D, and kind of pair it with something else I love, which is making content. But it's, you know, it is, I always do have that awareness. I'm always thinking about it from a kind of a control room perspective. In my head, I have 8 screens going, and I have a switcher, and I'm checking sound levels, and like, you know, that's how I think. And, you know, is this going to fly with if there are sponsors involved, you know, whatever it is, and making sure that we're interacting with chat and everything. So it's a very different animal for me. But I don't know. I love both. They're both different types of fun.
Do you prefer DMing or playing?
It depends on my mood, but generally I actually like to play because I am such a compulsive planner that when I DM, I over-prepare so much that I think myself out of it becomes such a workload for me to prepare so much. And I know that I won't use 90% of what I prepare, because no matter what you do, it never survives contact with the players. I've tried to cut down on that, but DMing for me, I end up getting so caught up in my prep that I, a lot of the time, am exhausted by the time I show up to DM. And so playing is really fun for me. But I do love running games like 10 Candles that are almost a zero prep GM situation, where I can't prepare much, and then to run that is really great for me. So
I have not played that one yet. I prep very little anyway. I mean, I used to like write adventures, like, and now it's like, if I was to write a module, like we've written a few we have them on our website, and it's like, going that I don't even know how to do this now, because I haven't done it in so long. You know, everything I tend to do is like, I might write down a couple sentences and I have a little bit of an idea what I want to do, but you know, I just throw some things out and see what my players do. And I've been really lucky because I've had really great players.
yeah.
So I find like the better your players are, the less prep you need, and the less relevant the prep you do is going to be.
And you know, I push heavily in my personal streams. I love the yes and philosophy with my players. I when I am DMing, I do all this prep, but I throw it all away, because I think your players will always come up with more interesting things than you could have ever anticipated. So saying yes to whatever they want to do, and then letting that shift your plan, is always the way to go. Because then they feel accomplished. They feel like they've achieved something. And they most of the time come up with something so creative that you never could have thought of it. And all of a sudden it's become something they're invested in a way that they wouldn't be if it was just, here's this thing I've created for you, do it. You know, I don't see my players as my puppets. You know, there's some DMs like their players to be their puppets in this story that they want to tell. For me, it's a collaborative process, and my players and I are part of the same story, and we're telling it together. So I want them to come up with things. I want them to expand on the world and give me history of things and people and places. I want to know where their characters are coming from and how they feel about things. And I want them to open a door and tell me what's behind it. I don't always want to tell them what's there. Yeah.
Now, in the comments, in the description, I have a link to a bunch of your stuff, and there's actually probably a bunch more stuff out there you guys can find if you look. But one of the things is a survey. Do you want to tell us about that?
Sure. So one of my projects, I have a few projects I'm working on right now, but one of them is I am currently writing a module that I'm hoping to publish on DM's Guild, which is about accessibility in tabletop gaming. I'm a very passionate advocate for disability rights, and so accessibility in gaming is something I'm very interested in. So the module I'm writing is going to focus. It's going to be a 2-part module. The first half is going to be about how to make your gaming table more accessible for disabled players. So how to make sure you can, you know, accommodate players who have specific needs, things like interpreters, or who need tactile dice, or who have attention needs, various forms of accessibility. And the second portion is going to be how to create playable disabled characters in game. So accommodations in game, in world, things like guide familiars or mobility aids, magical mobility aids, things like that. So I am in the early phases of this. I created an accessibility survey, which is linked, I guess, below. And if you guys would take the time to fill that out, it would be awesome. I'm compiling those results to sort of narrow my focus because there is so much content to address and so much need out there to improve accessibility. But I'm sort of trying to parse what people are most interested in having me develop. And then I will hopefully get that published in the next few months.
Are you going to break that down into like a personal, like a personal space and maybe like facility organization space? Because I feel like some things like for someone that, like their personal game is going to be much more difficult.
Yeah, I think primarily a lot of this is going to be dealing with your own personal table, but it also will be things that can be applied at something like League Play or a convention play. So a number of the things like how to interact with an interpreter would be something that you could apply either at a home game or in a broader space, or things like how to, assess your facility or apartment or home for wheelchair accessibility, which I'm not going to go hugely in depth, but I'm going to say these are the things you can look for. Like, is the doorway to your restroom wide enough for a wheelchair to get in and out? Things like that. So I also will have a list of resources that people can contact, but some of the bigger issues I want to address are the actual gameplay issues of how to deal with a situation like I've talked to a number of blind players and talking about things like auditory dice rolling apps or where to find Braille dice, because there are a few places that make them. They tend not to be very well weighted, but they do exist. You tend to be better off with an auditory dice rolling app, which, fun fact, your phone has it. You can ask Alexa or Siri or whichever digital assistant to roll a die, and you tell them which die you need them to roll, and they will roll it for you. So there's your fun instant accessibility tip of the day, which is also great if you ever need it for any other reason. I see the question, am I looking for anyone to answer the survey or would I rather people? I am happy for anyone to answer the survey, but in particular, I am looking for our people who play with disabled players or who are disabled themselves. But a lot of the survey questions have to do with the playable disabled characters in game. So for that, I'm interested to know what any player would like to play. So.
We recently had Zarif Gaming on. He's got a YouTube channel. And, he hangs out in the chat all the time and very bravely came on here and talked about mental health and being prescribed Dungeons and Dragons by the therapist. So, and we constantly do get, I wouldn't say constantly, but we've over the years gotten plenty of people who've reached out to us, and especially people that are vision impaired, and just bring up these issues and like do we have solutions? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't. Like we can broadcast it out there. Maybe the powers that be will see that there's more of a need and do something.
Yeah. So I have let the powers that be know that I have some of this information. I also have you can always kick people over to me. I'm happy to refer people to resources. But yeah, no, for me personally, just on a completely personal level, I have a condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a disability. It's a collagen disorder that means my joints constantly dislocate, and it's chronic pain, and it's multisystemic, and it's genetic. I've had it since birth, but it causes a lot of stuff, and I have a lot of bad days. And D&D for me is one of the things that gets me up and out of bed and getting going. And I have depression related to it and anxiety related to it. And D&D is something that helps me, get up and fight. It really is, for me, D&D has been a huge part of my mental and physical health, and keeping me in good shape. And I just want to be able to help pass that along. And there are tons of people who are doing amazing work with D&D therapeutically. I mean, people like Megan Connell, who was on GM Tips with Satine recently, is doing incredible work in North Carolina in terms of mental health and D&D. She's doing therapeutic D&D group sessions with patients. It's just really cool stuff happening. So, yeah.
Now you started something. They're rolling dice with
Okay.
with Alexa in the chat.
Sweet. Yeah, it's a pretty awesome thing. And I love that you know, everybody programmed their digital assistants to roll dice, but also of course they did, because they're awesome.
Yeah, I would have thought about, but I guess I did see that recently somewhere else. Someone was talking about you can have Alexa roll dice for you.
Yeah. Well, and the other big thing that happened this year for blind players or players who use screen readers is Beyond has been the biggest deal for players who use screen readers, because previously most D&D content was not available or not easy to find in Braille formats. So to have Beyond, to have every single book available, all of the published content available in a screen reader format, gives players immediate access at the same time it's published widely to all of the content. So that's a huge leap in terms of accessibility. I
did not realize that. And D&D Beyond I haven't seen them really talking about it either.
Yeah, it's something that people don't necessarily think about or discuss, but I have talked to a bunch of people who it's been just a dramatic change for them, because they now can access, you know, adventures. Previously, like, these modules were almost impossible to find in any sort of format that they could access. And now you just click on it on your computer, your screen reader goes after it, you have all of the books. It's huge. So it's really exciting.
That was a bit of a mind bomb for me, because I did not realize how, like, we've been proponents for D&D Beyond from the beginning, just because we like the tool. A lot of people online who are not, and you know, that is a great piece of information to bring to the argument, the fact that you may not like this, but this is actually a godsend for people who, you know, who didn't have access to the material before.
Yeah, and that's not just blind players. That's also players who have dyslexia or other sensory processing disorders. You know, there's just a whole host of reasons that it's amazing to have it in a digital format, where it can be either used by a screen reader or read on different brightnesses or contrast levels, like font sizes. Just it's an amazing thing to have that existing. So it's really cool.
The other thing too is when you mentioned your disability, I instantly got the mental image of joints dislocating. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. But the fun thing is it gives me the superpower of being able to reach behind any cabinet or, you know, dresser. When something falls, I am double jointed everywhere, basically. So I can always grab whatever falls behind the dresser.
My daughter, when she was like 3, there was a couple times that her elbow actually did that, and it went back in. But it, like, as a parent, it was like the scariest thing.
Yeah.
And the one time it was bothering her for much longer than it had ever before. So we went and took her to the emergency room, and we didn't have insurance at that time, so it was really rough. And it's just like, what do you do? And then like 15 minutes after being in the emergency room, she's like running around playing. I'm like, I guess she's okay. I guess we can go. But it is freaky, you know, from being a parent and having to.
Yeah, my elbow was the first joint they knew that dislocated on me. It used to happen to me about 3 times a week when I was a kid. So that was they call it nursemaid's elbow. Is that what they?
Yeah, that's what they did call it. Yeah.
Yeah, and they teach you how to pop it back in. Yeah, it's fun, fun and exciting.
Well, thankfully, we've never had to pop anything back in. That just gives me the heebie-jeebies.
But it's worth learning to know how to do, because it'll save you a trip to the emergency room.
Yeah, I imagine so.
And it's not too hard, but yeah, it's so random. But yeah, go ahead.
Do you have any games going on currently?
Yeah, I'm currently I have about 3 games that I'm playing in, and I am running 3 more, but they meet, you know, sporadically. It's just a timing issue lately. I haven't been able to run too many, but I do have a charity stream coming up on the 22nd. That's going to be really fun. On Exploding Dice, we're going to do a holiday module, and I have announced the first of my guests for that. I announced yesterday that Jose Molina, or on Saturday or Sunday, that Jose Molina, who is a writer on Firefly and Agent Carter and The Tick, and is a wonderful person, and also has been my player and is currently one of my DMs, is going to be one of my guests on that. So
I will put that in the description too. That is one of the things I forgot to put in there. I meant to track down some links for that.
I don't know that they're up yet, but it will be on Exploding Dice.
Okay, well, I'll link to Exploding Dice then and put the information there so people can find it. So if you're watching now and you want to find that, just look back in a little bit. And if you're watching in the future, then it should be there.
Yeah, and I'll be blasting it on all of my various platforms too. So if you follow me on any of the things, I'll put up the info when we get close to it.
So do you have a D&D type of favorite character that you like to play?
I always play an elf, pretty much. That's just my thing, to the point that it's a joke. But in almost every long-running campaign, I've played an elf. Though recently, I've been playing a lot of humans, which is very strange. But variant humans are pretty cool. And then the one upcoming that I really am excited about is I want to play a halfling barbarian grandma.
Halfling barbarian grandma.
Yeah, I have a whole backstory worked out of she was an adventurer and she decided she was gonna, she lost too many friends, decided she was gonna hang up the adventuring boots and had a family, bakes cookies, total great halfling grandma, and then one of her grandkids gets kidnapped and it brings her back into the fray. So just, rip-roaring halfling barbarian grandma. Though someone then raised the idea of having it be like an Italian nonna and having her wield like a mace, but it's a rolling pin and a cleaver, and I kind of am in love with that idea too.
So. That is great.
Yeah, but I love playing elves.
The cleaver seems a little brutal for a grandma, but it could work.
Retired adventurer, so I think there's been a trade-off there. I think she was very brutal and kind of had decided, okay, I'll go do the domestic thing, and then old habits die hard.
We have a grandma NPC halfling in my one game, Lala Midge, and then things are starting to come out that she was actually she was a rogue, she was in the Thieves Guild.
That's awesome.
She gifted the bard halfling her granddaughter with a enchanted stiletto, Last Whisper, that then when you breathe on it, it grows into a long sword.
Oh, that's super cool.
Not a long sword, a short sword. But yeah.
That's awesome.
So guys, if you want to jump into roll call and let us know where you're coming from, we'll get to you in a minute.
Yeah.
But when I was at Gen Con and played in the Maze Arcana stream game, pardon me, Satine and the Amy's played three barbarian halfling sisters.
Nice.
And that was a riot.
I love the idea of barbarian halflings. I think it's great. I love playing characters that are have weird juxtapositions. I think that's really fun. Right now, I'm playing a druid in one of my games who is taking the idea of Mama Bear to the extreme, to the point that she is telling our half-orc that he has to wear a mouth guard when he goes into combat. So it's a blast because I'm playing with players that are newer players who haven't ever seen somebody roleplay a character where they are beneficial to the party, but can be the personality of the character can be a source of conflict within the party. So it's an intentional juxtaposition that I talked with the DM about because he wanted them to have that kind of experience. So it's been really fun to get to play that and get to, at some points I turn into a giant ape and hold one of the fighters back from going in when she's doing something stupid, So it's been a blast. So I really enjoy playing characters like that, but I've been playing for so long that at this point I'm happy to take whatever random, I could throw a dart at a dartboard and I'd be happy to play anything that it would come up with. I railed against clerics for a long time. I never wanted to play a cleric, and I'm having the best time playing a Tempest cleric right now. So, it really is about finding the things that unlock a character for you. And the characters that I have not enjoyed playing are characters where I just could not find the thing that unlocked it for me, or where I had an incompatible play style with the DM.
Tempest clerics are fun. They've got a whole suite of abilities.
Oh yeah, well, and this one, she's basically like a nice, almost like a nice Brooklyn girl whose parents were like, "No, you got to go to medical school." She's like, "Ma, I don't want to go to medical school." And like, but you got to go to medical school. That's what we do in this family. She's, "I don't want to go to medical school. I want to go adventure." So she went to medical school, and now she's adventuring. So that shores up why I can heal, because I just didn't want to be a heal bot, and then lets me go smash things.
Zap stuff.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump into the roll call here. We got Poison coming at us from Kuwait. Edmund Washington in the house with Elfbait. Raven is in the OZ. We got Zarf Gaming, Redizio, New Mexico. Philly in the house with DM Don. Wales in the UK. Truemate. Friginator is in Washington. We've got Jay Kawai coming to us from Japan. We've got Georgia in the house with Brian Collin. Missouri with KB, Louisiana with Sean, Montana with Tucker Author, London, UK with World Anvil. Also, England, London, we've got Hiraman. We've got Lynn, Massachusetts in the house. Massachusetts in the house with Comrade. Sorry, I got distracted. We got 100 Years Boar, Washington. Yeah, baby. Hillsbury, Missouri with Underwood Sketches. Ohio with Joshua. Rio Rancho, New Mexico. Shallender, Atlanta is Jinker GM. Utah, Virgilio. We've got Upstate New York with Charles Cole. Indiana with, and it jumped on me. I lost you, Indiana.
It's O'Neill Flynn.
Yep, you got it. It is O'Neill Flynn. We've got Norway in the house with Lars. Florida with Captain Burt. New York City, Brian F. Also, some more Norway with Nordic Dragon.
Hey, NDC. Hey, guys. What's up?
DC in Michigan. Andrew in Missouri. And we've got people coming to us all over the place. We got Leeds, UK with Drew. We've got Israel in the house with Ace of Spades. Ukraine with Blunt Man.
Oh, sweet. Where in Ukraine, Blunt Man? I went to Kiev and to Rivne a few years back. It was awesome. Such a beautiful place.
We've got Cape Canaveral, Florida with Meat Mo, Puerto Rico with Renato, New Brunswick with Ben, Houston, Texas with Stefan, upstate New York with Scott. We've got Eric in Denmark. So we've got people all over the place, which is always so cool to see how far and wide people are playing D&D. Netherlands is weighing in with Francisco.
That's awesome.
Oh, so Bluntman did answer. I'm not sure how you'd say it, but it's done with TCK at the end.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful country.
So, it's always amazing to see, everyone tuning in from everywhere. It's like one of the favorite parts. And then I butcher everywhere everyone's from anyway. We also got Mr. Trask in Belgium.
Oh, sweet, Mr. Trask. Cool. My brother, unless you are my brother, which you could be, because it's totally possible, but my brother is in Belgium. He lives in Brussels.
Does your brother have a Belgium accent?
No, my brother does not. I mean, occasionally you hear a little bit of the French intonation happen with him now. He's lived in Europe long enough, but yeah.
Or is he a YouTuber? Mr. Trask is actually a very new YouTuber, and he's got a fantastic channel.
Oh, cool. Well, my brother used to use Trask as his handle for a bunch of stuff. So I was like, yeah, actually, okay, well, it's nice to meet you, Mr. Trask. That's awesome. And there is another Trask floating around Brussels. So apparently there are two of them.
There are two, yeah. He lives an hour from Brussels.
Fair enough. Nice.
So cool. Do you have sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Oh yeah.
So of all the stuff you're working on, what is like the most exciting to you?
Oh man.
Because you have like a lot of fun things you do.
I do. I'm doing some really cool stuff that's in development that is not in a place where I can really talk about it much. But I have a project that I developed that is in the works, and that's kind of all I can say. We're moving forward and hoping that I can say more soon. But
can you say what for what medium?
It's TV. I created a TV show, and I'm hoping that we're getting it made. We're working on it. But it's a process. You know, TV is a very long process, and it's a complicated one, and there's a million steps and a million places that it could go wrong and fall apart. So, but I'm very proud of the work that we've done on this thing and hoping it goes. But so that's really something I'm really excited about. I have a really cool short film coming up in January that I'm going to be in. I get to be a demon, which I never get to do. So I get to do full special effects makeup, and I'm very, very excited about that. I'm really proud of the accessibility module. I think it's material that needs to be out there, and it's very, very important to me that disabled players are given a place at the table and access to the game in every way possible. So that means a lot to me, and the fact that people have been so supportive about that project and that process has been absolutely incredible. I've met some spectacular people as I've been researching it and researching and developing that. So yeah, I have a lot I'm really excited about.
I was looking at your Instagram, and I came across the one picture, and I was like, oh my God, what happened? And then like the first line is, don't send me any concerned messages, because you just did like a demo of Bruise makeup.
Yeah, that actually was going to be for the last episode of for Seven Souls. I was going to do special effects makeup on one of the characters who was pretty beat up at that point, and so I did the player was concerned I wouldn't be able to do the makeup fast enough. I said, and in 3 minutes I responded to the text message with a black eye, bruise, special effects makeup.
It was very convincing. That's for sure.
It was fun. Special effects makeup is a blast. You get to do really, really silly, crazy, wacky things, and it's so much fun.
So with the D&D movie on the horizon, and you kind of being in that industry, do you have any thoughts on that? What you would like to see? What do you think would make a good D&D movie?
I think it's really tricky. I think the first thing they need to do is make sure that the creative team is staffed with players and DMs, with people that actually love the game and are concerned about preserving the integrity of the game, and showing their passion and love for the game, while also simultaneously understanding entertainment and what makes a good movie and what makes a good story. And I think at this point, everybody in Hollywood is playing D&D. The reality is everyone I work with plays and has been playing for a really long time. All of the writers have been playing for years and years and years. I mean, everybody's coming forward now going, yeah, I've been having a D&D game for 20 years and I just never talked about it. But it's true. And so I think the talent is there to do this now. I think years ago, people wouldn't have said, yes, I play D&D. Yes, let's make a movie. Now I think we have the skill set to do it. But I think the more interesting thing, and this is actually something I'm sort of playing with in terms of another project I'm doing, is also recognizing what it does for people, what function it serves for people who play. What does the game mean to people, and explaining that as an emotional note in the game and in whatever story you're telling. So I think that's pretty important too.
Have you seen the movie Of Dice and Men?
I have not.
It's on. You can. I'm pretty sure it is on. I know it's on Amazon.
Is it? I don't know. Is it a documentary about?
No, it's not a documentary. It's more like a drama / light comedy. It's on. You can check it out on Amazon for sure.
Okay.
And Seth Pulowski Kelly Slagle. They're involved in that project. I forget the name of the other person that is a screenwriter. But they're also doing a documentary now, Eye of the Beholder, Art of D&D.
Right, about the Art of D&D, yeah.
With Brian Stillman. But they had actually done that. And like, all the books are like GURPS books because they couldn't get, or GURPS or Palladium or one of them, because they couldn't get Wizards of the Coast to give them permission to use their books.
Yeah.
But it's about D&D, and but it's more than that. It's like about a group of friends,
right?
And it's handled really well. If you get a chance, you should check it out.
Yeah,
I keep singing the praises for it. It's like one of the best D&D movies. When my partner had weighed in on a Facebook post the other day that asked, what do you guys think was the best or worst D&D parody movie? And he's like, the D&D movie.
Yeah, it just, nobody took anything seriously, and that's the problem. But I think we're in a very different place as a culture now than we were. When you have something like Game of Thrones getting Emmys, that's a very different world than when fantasy is a genre that nobody talks about or no one will, put money into. You have it as the single most expensive television show in production.
So Elfbait asked the question, what makes a D&D movie and not just a fantasy movie? And that's like the really tough part, right? How do you not just make, Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, I mean, I think then you're having to address either the core D&D mythology, that you're having to take on these iconic characters, which is a double-edged sword because part of what makes those characters great is everybody has their own version of them. In their games, everybody's going to come up against different creatures at different points and have their own ideas of what those experiences are like. And the second you put that on screen, there's now a canonical version. Or you do something like Cloak and Dagger did in the 80s, and you frame it in the story and you have the interplay of the game and the world. Or the way Stranger Things did. I think Stranger Things did a brilliant job of weaving the two. So I think the difference between a fantasy movie and a D&D movie is probably addressing the meta of this being a game.
And I used to think I would be against that, but now, like, having seen it done well, I'm really interested in seeing that, and I hope they will take that tack with it. And the movie has the potential to be huge for the hobby. So,
well, and to be honest, I think it's actually better suited to a TV series because a TV series is closer to a campaign than a movie is, and you have more time to tell those stories, and you have more time to get to know the players too, which I think is part of it. Because I think exploring what D&D is serving in a person's life. It's that thing of whenever someone is playing D&D for the first time, what character they're going to roll up. Everything about them by the character they choose to play. It's the reason that so many people play paladins for the first character. Idealized version of how they see themselves. And so I think having the juxtaposition of the person and the character is a really interesting, important thing in telling that story. So I think a TV show is actually a better format for it, for me, because you have the time to explore that, which you won't in a movie.
Netflix should get on it.
I'm sure they're trying. I'm sure they are trying.
But I have to agree. Yeah,
Netflix. Call me Netflix. I'm down. I'm there.
You ready to make it happen?
Absolutely. Oh man, in a heartbeat, I would. Please let me do D&D or TV show or anything, please.
Yeah. When we're talking about when worlds collide, Poison wants to know, what was your first character?
My first character was a half-elf druid named Aoife.
My first character was a wood elf druid fighter.
Nice.
Derek Woodstalker, I think. So you can tell, probably like how old I was when I came up with the name too, like around.
Yeah, no, I always go to, I feel like I almost always go to like Gaelic names or mythological names. Big names matter to me in everything I do, in my writing and in my D&D stuff. So I'm always looking in depth for names on things. So all of my characters have very specific names. But yeah, Aoife, and her big combination was like Entangle and Fireball. I just spammed that. That was like most of my campaign was like Entangle, Fireball.
What more do you need? So have you set a deadline for yourself for your module?
I mean, tentatively, I'd like to have it done in March, but realistically, because of the nature of TV production, I don't know what my work schedule is going to be. And if I'm on a show, I'm working 16 to 18 hours a day. So it becomes really difficult to do anything else. So it's just going to depend on life. So I have not set a hard and fast deadline. I also really want to make sure I leave enough time to have it evaluated by people from the communities I'm discussing to make sure that we are really hitting all of the notes appropriately, and that the tools that we're providing are helpful and useful and giving them what they need to make the game accessible. So I think it's important that if we're doing resources for blind players, we're having them evaluate those resources. Or if we are addressing playing amputee characters in game, that those adjustments are being looked at by someone who lives that, and they can say, yes, this is a useful accommodation in game, in world, or not. So I think that's an important thing to look at, and I want to make sure I have enough time to have that advisement happen.
That definitely makes sense. So along those veins, World Anvil does have a question. They want to know if you can give an example of cool in-game items for a blind and deaf character.
So for a deaf-blind character, or for a blind character or a deaf character?
Well, it says and, but I imagine it's or.
Okay, so the things I'm sort of exploring are things like a guide familiar for a blind character. You could do something that is a comprehend language type device for a deaf character. So there is not, it doesn't require spoken language, but the character can sign, and the other players can understand, and anyone they're communicating with can also understand. Or you can make that selective so that either it can become almost a coded use of sign for that the spell is only active on those who they are choosing to have it active for. But again, those are specific rules you would have to work out within your campaign, how you would like to use those. For a deafblind character, I would probably recommend giving them a human type familiar, or a humanoid familiar who can act as an interpreter and assist, but is inactive in combat. So they're value neutral in combat, other than conveying the information of locations of the individuals or the terrain to your player. And I would obviously say that that player is immune to blindness and deafness effects. However, their familiar would not be. So those are the few things that I would start with, if those are some.
I'm envisioning an imp now taking that role on and being kind of a jerk. So.
Yeah, an imp is great, or some sort of, pseudo dragon type thing where you can have them flying up above and they can see down and kind of project that into that landscape into the mind of your character, so they know where everything is and can react accordingly. So there's you can also play with ideas of echolocation too, so you could boost your perception on a character so that they have super high auditory perception, but then you can give them a consequence of loud noises being causing either levels of exhaustion or something similar for a short duration.
There are definitely some fun ideas. And I'm also kind of like imagining using the familiar, because then the familiar could become the voice for the character, but then you get like the character's personality filtered through this familiar. So it'd be interesting too for the other players to like try and figure out, the actual personality of the character, because they have to like separate the filter from that person.
But I would definitely encourage, if you're going to do that, to make sure that the player is getting to play their character, not that to ensure that they play the character, not that they're playing the familiar as the character, because the familiar is serving an interpreter role, and the job of the interpreter is just to convey the information for the character. So I think there's a definite balance that you have to strike there. But if something were to happen and that familiar were to get separated, maybe for a short time you could have an NPC interpreter working with the character, and that could be an interesting way to do that kind of thing too.
Well, I'm thinking from the player's perspective of, like, part of it would be like the familiar says what they wanted them to say, but then, but maybe then the player is like shrugging their shoulders, rolling their eyes, shaking their head because it's familiar's doing what it's supposed to, but I envision like pseudo dragons being very cat-like, so yeah. I could just imagine like getting a cat to do something that it quote unquote doesn't want to do, but it does it anyway. It becomes part of like the game. I'm thinking of my cat, and he's kind of a jerk.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with familiars, and using them as either interpreters or as guide familiars, or there's all sorts of fun ideas with it. I think that's really cool, and I do love the idea of the familiar sort of spinning things and having its own agenda a little bit.
It kind of gives like the player the opportunity to almost play like two characters.
Yeah.
So we are up on the hour mark. If you want to just wrap up with whatever you want to leave people with, again, there are links in the description.
Sure. So thank you so much for having me. This has been really, really fun. So coming up, I have on the 22nd, I'm DMing a holiday game on exploding dice with Jose Molina will be one of my players. I'm announcing the other players in the next couple of weeks. It's going to be really fun. We're playing for charity for Extra Life. It's going to be great. Then otherwise you can follow me on Twitter as @dreamwisp, on Twitch as dreamwispjen, and also on Patreon as dreamwispjen, Instagram as dreamwisp. I'm hoping the accessibility module will be up on DM's Guild in the next few months, but please take the survey. It's down below in the doobly-doo to steal from Matt Colville. And yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. This has been a blast.
Thank you for coming on, and thanks everyone for hanging out with us. This hour always goes by so fast. But until next time, guys, stay nerdy.
Yeah. Bye, guys.